3.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Idiomatic Top 3.
With Nicholas, I am the gaming correspondent for Idiomatic.
And I am Dimitri, editor-in-chief of Idiomatic and movie critic.
And today we're talking sequels. Now, we're already planning another podcast that actually talks about the mechanics of sequels, but we're going to list some of our overrated picks for sequels and underrated picks for sequels as well. Wouldn't it be cool if we were to pick overrated picks for sequels and underrated picks for something completely different? It's like underrated picks for flowers in a vase.
Roses, obviously.
Anywho, let's talk a little bit about what makes a great sequel. We're going to discuss that further in a later episode, but let's just talk about it.
Well, first of all, I like it when they put an effort in the sequel and putting a good story. I don't like it when they just do like, here are the characters you like from the previous movies, and we're going to put them in any old movie that doesn't make any sense.
Or in the same story as the previous movie.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Or, it's the exact same story, or they took like a fan fiction written by a 14-year-old fan off of, off the web, and now this is going to be our sequel. Put some effort into it. It's not because the first movie was a cash cow that the second one deserves to not have any effort, Give something to your fans.
Yeah, building on that, one of the things that annoys me that they actually do very commonly at Hollywood is give it to a 5-year-old. No. Is they'll take a script from, a different story completely from, some new writer and sort of shoehorn the characters into it and go like, that's our sequel. I hate that. I feel a sequel should have a story that actually relates to the characters. Isn't just like, oh, is that a script about an action movie? Yeah, just shove John McClane in there. Thank you. No.
Yeah. And in that sense, you want to keep the characters the same as well. One example I think of is Pyro from X2, who was like this character that felt betrayed by humanity, and he kind of felt that Magneto was like the right person to go, even though he cared about mutants. And in X3, all of a sudden, he wants to kill Professor X for no reason whatsoever. What happened to the character all of a sudden? It was really weird.
Yeah, well, I know. X3 is one of the worst aggressors when it comes to just not respecting the characters. Like, Magneto does some of the weirdest stuff in that movie.
I know. So at least respect the characters a little bit. And as well, something I like a lot is respecting the continuity. I'm really nitpicky on that, maybe a little too much. It's something that's been said in the first movie, followed in the second movie. As an example, I guess the worst offender is Highlander. Highlander, they're like immortals. They've been on Earth. All of a sudden, Highlander 2, they're aliens from the planet Zeist. What happened all of a sudden?
Oh, the continued errors on that are crazy.
I know. I mean, I said it's the worst offender. There are other ones, but that's just as an example of like the worst offender there completely.
Oh, no. It's astounding. It's not even a challenge to find them. It's like, and here's how Ramirez and Connor really met. It was like, actually, you showed that scene in the first movie. It's not the same scene.
I know.
Oh, man. I have to admit, for me, what I expect from a sequel actually depends on the genre.
Okay.
I have very different expectations. Like, for an action movie, for example, I kind of like the This Is a New Mission sequel. I'm not a big fan of, like, this is a continuation of the story.
Yeah.
Sequel, I'm not a big fan. Like, I like this is a new mission, this is a new adventure. But for comedies and whatnot, I actually like this is the continuation of what we set up in the first movie. I don't like it in comedy sequels. It's like, here's those same characters in a new wacky situation. I always disconnect when they do that.
Well, you have an example of that.
The whole 9 yards was a really underrated comedy. It's very, very funny with Matthew Perry and
Bruce
Willis. And they're all in this big situation involving contract killers and whatnot. And then the second movie is like, more contract killers come up. It's like, come on. It disconnects. It's too much of a leap in terms of suspension of disbelief to think that this would happen to these same characters twice,
Yeah.
As opposed to, for some reason, I actually believe that Bruce Willis, John McClane, will always attract terrorists wherever he goes. I'm fine with that for some reason.
Well, that's his job, isn't it?
Yeah, but it never happens because of his jobs. He's always, like, roped into it despite everything.
That is a good point. He does that.
And I don't like redundancy in, like I just said, like, not the same story. And yet, for some reason, when it's horror movies, I tend to be a lot more forgiving of that. Where for horror movies, I don't actually want to see the same characters progress. You know,
No, they have to die.
yeah, well, a lot of them have to die, but that's exactly the thing. It's like I kind of like when they keep the same villain and introduce a new bunch of kids, because I kind of like the idea of like whoever escaped the first movie lived happily ever after. Look, they just faced a supernatural killer. Give them a fucking break. You know? Introduce a new bunch of kids. Use the same structure and the same killer to introduce a new metaphor about whatever we're afraid of in life. That totally works for me. But like if you try to continue the story like they did with Scream 3, for example, where it's like, this is the final chapter in Sydney's life. It's like, give Sydney a break. Like, you know, it's like...
But you learn that everything she went through in the first movie was a lie, so, you know, that movie doesn't count anymore for her.
and that bugs me.
Yeah,
exactly.
I understand.
Oh, that's another good point. Do not invalidate what happened in the previous movie in your sequel. I hate that. Alien Cube, or Alien 3 as most people know it, David Fincher's Alien.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of Aliens, you know, you have a set of characters, without necessarily going to spoilers, who survive the event, and like, yay! And then the first scene in Alien 3 is like, they all die. Like, what? No!
Wow. Don't use them. What's the big deal?
I know! It makes me angry. This Bourne series had the same thing with, you know, in the first movie, the girlfriend being there, and then the second movie is like, yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
No!
You know, just have her, you know, we broke up, and don't use her instead. They just shoot her. And, she's not only not in the movie, she's dead.
When you kill her. And that drives me nuts. Like, Alien did that, like, in Alien Cube did that in the first scene. Like, the very first 3 minutes, everybody you love died. And you're like, I hate that.
And even again, there are more reasons to hate that movie, but X3, for no reason. They have Cyclops. First 10 minutes of the movie, hey, Cyclops dead.
Yeah.
Why? Just have him leave.
Do not invalidate what happened in the movie. Just, if somebody survives in the movie, keep them alive. I mean, again, horror movies get to break that rule because they're horror movies. You know, people die in horror movies, but it's one of the reasons why I don't want to see the same characters again. Because the characters that survive are usually characters you become attached to, and if they show up again, there's one of two things that can happen. Either because they've sort of become royalty in the franchise, they never die, and you're like, oh, suspense. Oh, is the killer gonna get her? It's like, no, she's been in 2 other movies. No. Or what happens is that they do kill her, and you go like, what the heck? I love that character. Why did you do that to that character? It's like you can't win, so just might as well bring new characters in.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Alright, so let's get to it right now with overrated picks. What is your first overrated pick for a sequel?
The Bourne Supremacy. That movie had the good intentions. They tried to put action scenes in it. You just couldn't see what was happening in the action scenes because the camera kept shaking all the time. I can see how shaky camera can be used, you know, to make a film more interesting, but not during action scenes. I want to see what's happening. I want to see Bourne kick ass. I mean, one of the coolest things I thought in the first movie was when he was fighting that sniper in the field. And, you know, he goes there with a shotgun and he gets the sniper. Take a few seconds and imagine that scene, but with the camera shaking like crazy. That scene would not have been that cool at all. And that's basically the Bourne Supremacy the whole time. Just shaking camera all the time. You can't see anything at all. Is very, very bad sequel. And for some reason it did very well. It did so well that they came up with a third movie, but I do not enjoy watching that movie.
Yeah, it was a huge success. Paul Greengrass became a superstar action director because of Bourne Supremacy, and I agree with you. I think it's star. In fact, longtime listeners will know that I've listed it as one of the most overrated movies of the decade because, as you say, you can't see anything. As we've mentioned before we start this particular segment, and we're just talking about sequels, they invalidate some of the key points in the first movie, notably the point of view character played by Franca Potente just suddenly disappears. Let's be honest, the story is dumb.
Oh, it's bad.
The story, because the big idea is that he risks a whole bunch of innocent lives to seek redemption, and you're like, redemption only works if you stop hurting people.
Exactly.
No, I'm in agreement with you completely. I hated the movie. A funny thing, though, if I recall correctly, you actually saw Supremacy before you saw Identity.
Yeah, I saw Supremacy first, and that movie was so bad. You kept insisting on me watching the first movie, and I was like, no. I mean, I saw the second movie. It was crap. How good can the first movie be? And yeah, I saw it and I was like, wow, those are two different worlds. The first movie is so much better.
Yeah.
You can see the action. The story is a lot better. It was great.
Yeah. My biggest problem with Supremacy, in fact, is that betrayal of the first movie. Because the whole idea of, and I don't just mean in terms of the story, in terms of the way it's filmed. The whole idea of the first movie is that you are a witness to the awesomeness of Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
And he himself is a witness to it because he doesn't know that he has all these super spy abilities, if you will. So he sort of surprises himself every now and then you have the Frank Potente character just looking at him, also surprised, and you are also surprised. So the camera is still distant, allowing you to watch his awesomeness.
Yeah.
And then Supremacy decided to change tack and like shake around to get you. You don't see anything, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
And the whole idea is to get you in the middle of the action. And it's like, but that's not Bourne. You can't be in the middle of the action with Bourne because Bourne himself is not in the middle of the action. He's sort of a witness to himself.
Yeah.
I think the shaky cam is fine. I mean, it's a technique. You can overdo it or underdo it, but I think it's the wrong one for Bourne.
Yeah. So, what is your first pick, Dimitri?
I'm going to go with a very different pick than we usually do. So I'm going to pick a teen movie that many people may not have seen of the listeners, because I know the listeners tend to be a little bit older than the audience that this movie targets, which is High School Musical 2. I will defend, with, a fair amount of enthusiasm, High School Musical 1. Yeah, people of our age all go like, this is crap. And it's like, of course you think it's crap. It's aimed for 12 years old, and you're not 12. But it's actually really good. It has some edgy, edgy for a Disney Channel movie, ideas about what it's like to be in high school. Because the whole idea of the big lesson of the first High School Musical movie is that, look, I don't care if he's your best friend or whatever. People in high school are so insecure, they will protect the sanctity of their cliques and walk all over you no matter what. So if you're the basketball guy and you're the captain of the basketball gang and suddenly you want to be the drama guy, all your friends in the basketball team will not care whether or not that's what you want to be happy. They'll be like, what are you doing? You're destroying the world order. Up yours. And he doesn't care. It doesn't matter if it's your best friend. That's what they're going to do. And it's true. And it's a little bit savage the way that they show it in High School Musical, in the sense that it's like, look, the Corbin Bleu is Zac Efron's best friend, but it doesn't matter. He's going to act like a jerk towards Zac Efron from that point on, and that's just the way it goes, And the whole lesson is like, look, do what you want to do, and look, if your friends are not cool with it, just let them deal with it. They'll either adapt or they won't, but just do what you want to do,
Yeah.
Which is, it's not super brilliant as a lesson, but it is a worthy one.
Yeah.
High School Musical 2 does the opposite. It's all about, like, there's actually a line where where Zac Efron has a choice between kissing ass a little bit to some scout agents for his basketball career, or hanging out with his friends, and his friends are like, he's like, I don't recognize you anymore. You're spending all your time with your scouts instead of nurturing your friend or your friends, and you're like, oh God, you needy little jerks. And then at the end, Zac Efron, well, not at the end, but at one point, Zac Efron actually goes like, well, I can care what you think of me, or I can care about what you, or I can care what my friends think. I'm gonna care what my friends think. And you're like, yes, because that's exactly what kids need today. More incentive to cave into peer pressure. Like, really.
Wow.
And, the movie just gets off on the wrong foot for me because it's called High School Musical 2, alright?
Yeah.
It takes place at a summer camp where they do a variety numbers competition. Otherwise, in other words, High School Musical 2, no high school, no musical.
Wow.
Awesome! It is tart. Not only is it boring, it is just evil in what it teaches kids.
And how well did that movie do?
Oh, gangbusters! That movie was everywhere. Like, everywhere. Like, it is the... it got beaten now, but at the time, it was the highest grossing Disney Channel movie ever made, by far.
Wow.
Well, so much so that High School Musical 3 actually got a theatrical release. It was supposed to be another TV movie, but High School Musical 2 was so big that they decided we are going to try our chance in the theaters.
That probably didn't do very well.
The third one? No. By then, it was just like the 12-year-olds were 15-year-olds, and they realized, Zac Efron is cool, but I don't know. I don't really want to see him sing anymore. Yes, so that was my pick.
Can't comment on it much because I haven't seen it.
Alright, so your second pick for Overrated in that case.
Return of the King. That movie was just 2.5 hours of CGI battles. It would have been great, say, if you're very, very patient and you sit through all 3 Lord of the Rings movies at once. The last movie would have been like, oh, it's a proper ending, to all the movies together. But just as a standalone movie, it's just 2.5 hours of CGI battles. It is very boring. And then you finally get to the ending, then you get another ending, and then you get a third ending, you get a fourth ending. What is happening? Stop faking us out with those endings.
No, it's almost worse than AI.
I did not enjoy that movie, and I actually liked the other 2 movies, Lord of the Rings, and I was really looking forward to that one, and it is really a huge disappointment. It was just CGI battles, and that was about it. Nothing really marking happened. I don't see why people love that movie and swear by it so much, and how it was able to win so many Oscars. God.
It's so symptomatic of what happens with trilogy making. Like, trilogies have become such a big thing nowadays. Well, less now, like, people have calmed down. But, like, just throughout the aughts, really. It was like trilogy after trilogy. Matrix, blah, blah, blah. And they always do that with the third movie where it's like, oh, we need to do a climax. That's not just a climax to our movie, but that's a climax to the entire trilogy. So what they do is that they take a battle or an action scene, and then they multiply the number of parties involved. So, 6 heroes becomes, six armies of people duking it out. And then they multiply the amount of time spent to that action scene. So whereas a half-hour action scene for the big climax becomes an hour and a half, as you mentioned. Yeah. Or 2 hours and a half, did you mention?
Yeah, I said 2.5. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it is very, very long for very, very little payoff, honestly.
Yeah, well, it's because you're supposed to view that the entire movie as the payoff. And it doesn't work because for the simple reason that unless you're willing to watch them all back to back, and that's like 10 hours of movies, by the way, it doesn't, you don't have the build up towards such a large and ridiculously extended climax. And the thing of it, most of us have lives.
Yeah.
It's like I could watch 10 hours of Lord of the Rings in a row so that the final battle scene of 3 hours makes sense dramatically and emotionally for me, or I could get laid.
Or do something else, either or.
Like,
and honestly, the Ghost Army looked ridiculous, but that's just from, my personal point of view. And, I mean, it invalidated, it was like a 45-minute battle where they're trying to take the city, and they're fighting real hard, and all of a sudden the ghosts appear, and, all right, battle over. The ghost solved everything. It's like, well, gee, why couldn't those ghosts get there earlier, and, we wouldn't have that damn battle, and we would just have moved on. That made me angry. Those ghosts they were not there in the novel. They shouldn't have been there. And it was like, oh, speedy resolution of the battle. Those ghosts solve everything. That made me angry.
Yeah, and the writing is really clumsy. Like, I think Legolas has one of the worst lines in action filmmaking ever.
Yeah.
You have, Aragorn explaining his plan is like, okay, they're gonna distract them, so we can do this. And then you have Legolas going it's a diversion. It's like, oh, Legolas, you got hold of a thesaurus, have you? It's just... Oh, yeah, and the CG. Yeah, no, everything you said, exactly on point. I have nothing to add to that.
All right. So, what is your second movie, Dimitri?
Well, I also have a return in my picks, would you believe, and also a third part of a trilogy. Return of the Jedi. It's not that I don't like Return of the Jedi. I think it's a fine movie. I just don't think it's very good.
You just hate Ewoks, do you?
I don't. I actually don't. Believe it or not, that is not the part that bugs me. I will say that they're not super, dramatic as creatures. They're a little bit too cuddly to make for an effective action war scene. Yeah. But that's not the biggest problem with it. The parts that are undeniably good. Everything relating to the final scene with Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. That was absolutely lovely. It was a really powerful emotional scene. Especially, when he sees the ghost at the end and he sees Hayden Christensen and Shin. Oh wait. No, I'm actually talking about the original cut because the everything that Lucas added to that movie, apart from the idea of the entire galaxy celebrating, which was a nice add-on, everything else he added was like, no. But anybody who still believes that Lucas planned the whole thing and not just had really, really broad lines is naive after the prequels. But anybody who still believed it even before the prequel is incredibly naive and is not paying attention. Because the second movie, Empire Strikes Back, Chapter 5, the second movie. Okay, look, I'm just talking about the original trilogy. Has Yoda and Obi-Wan going like, but there is another, and they're all going like, oh yeah, the other's gonna be awesome, yeah. And like as a viewer, you're like, oh, there's another awesome. Who's it gonna be? And then it turns out to be this random character. Well, she is in the cast from the beginning of the movie. Well, you've seen Return of the Jedi. It turns out to be Leia.
Yeah.
And everybody's going like, what? What's wrong with that? And I'm like, because it makes no dramatic sense. It's like, but no, it's logical. It's like, yes, fanboy, it's fine in terms of internal logic. It doesn't violate anything. But dramatically, how much sense does it make for a movie to go like, there's another one, ba ba ba, who is it gonna be? Oh, anticipate for three years what it's gonna be. It's gonna be this character who doesn't affect the plot in any way, shape, or form.
She gets shot.
She doesn't use her Jedi powers at any point in the third movie. She just goes like, I'm a Jedi, and nothing.
Yeah.
He's so dumb.
Well, that just means she can't kiss Luke anymore.
Yeah, well, again, yeah, that also brings that problem because that scene suddenly becomes really gross. And also, the movie itself, the structure is really off. You have two movies in one, really. You have the rescue of Han Solo, and then you have the final battle. And it's not cut with particular agility. It's sort of like, oh, we rescued Han Solo. Awesome, final fight.
Yeah.
What?
That is true. I'll give you that. The transition is pretty weak.
Then Lucas tries for nature versus machines with the Ewok stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, can nature beat technology? And it's like, again, it's sort of... And again, I'm basing that from his commentary. This is a point of view that I'm just adding because of his commentary. I would never have seen that as a fault of the movie if I hadn't listened to his commentary. But he says that this is meant to symbolize nature versus technology. First of all, I've never seen that before. Totally original. But second, it's not the nature versus technology because the Ewoks are using primitive technology. So it's primitive technology versus more modern technology. It's still technology. Like a little trap, like a Moberg device that like lets a log hit something. That doesn't happen naturally. That is technology.
That is true.
What else is wrong with that movie? I can go on. I'm very irritated with just the general pace of that movie and the way it's made.
I thought the last part when you have three different settings, the lightsaber fight, and then the space fight, and then the planet fight. I thought that was fine. I really enjoyed that actually. You go from one to the other, and you actually care about what's happening. Oh, this is happening now, and then you're cutting away. They're cutting away. Oh, we're back to this part, and you like that part.
Yeah, no, the parallel editing is really well done.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like, when I was reading Lord of the Rings, the book, and, I cared a lot more about what was happening to Aragorn than what was happening to the Hobbits, so you're stuck with a Hobbit chapter, and you're like, God damn it. I mean, they really make you care a lot about all three things, and that's what I really like about that part.
It's part of what makes it a decent movie, definitely.
Yeah.
But... when I actually think episode 1 is better.
Ouch.
Yep. It has the same problems with the acting. The acting is awful on both sides. Cuddly characters that don't belong in the story. Both of them have them. But it was just a richer universe in episode 1. And I'm not saying episode 1 was a great movie. I'm just saying that it's just about they're both kind of mediocre.
So Jar Jar Binks and Ewoks, they rate the same to you?
Well, if you watch episode 1 again, Jar Jar Binks on second viewing isn't nearly as annoying. He was just such a shock to the system because you sort of build up Star Wars in your head, and then when you go to the theaters and go like, that's not what I want the Star Wars to be. But if you look back, it's like, actually that is kind of a Star Wars character.
Okay.
The final fight, like you mentioned, the way it was cut, it was pretty cool. But like I mentioned, I had problems with the Ewok scenes, which weren't super exciting, and the Lando Calrissian scene.
Yeah.
They weren't really exciting to me because it was like, But you've already had that fight in the first in Star Wars, like in A New Hope. It's just a rehash. It's like, how much more suspenseful is it now that they have to fight a Death Star that's not even complete and therefore less deadly?
But they had the same exact fight in Episode 1, where they're going into space to remove the, not destroy the Death Star this time, but destroy a ship that powers the robots. So it's the exact same thing again.
But it's not the same. Well,
It's
I will not defend the space battles in Episode 1 because they put me to sleep. I was like, I want to see Darth Maul again. So I certainly won't defend that. But the difference in these cases is that it's not the exact same threat. It's like back in the 80s and 70s, you saw Star Wars and you was like, oh, Death Star, awesome. And then the third movie is going like, oh, half a Death Star. Way to escalate the stakes there.
Yeah, but it was only the Death Star, and they couldn't. It was basically them flying through a tunnel in Episode 4, I guess. Whereas this time they were fighting the whole fleet, the Star Destroyers, and so I think it was actually a better battle.
Oh no, I still think the Star Wars.
And it wasn't just flying through a tunnel; they had to fly inside the Death Star this time. They kind of fixed the problem they had a little bit. Instead of the vent being small enough for a torpedo, the vent was big enough that, ships could fly through it. But
yeah, everybody gets obsessed about that. I still maintain that the whole World War II pilot scene in the original Star Wars is still one of the best action scenes ever to be put on film, period. And it has yet to be beaten, and certainly not by the Star Wars franchise.
I guess. All right.
But yeah, and again, I want to stress, I'm pointing out what doesn't work about the movie. I'm not saying it's in any way a bad movie. It's a fine movie. It's just not nearly on the same level as the other two Star Wars movies that have come out at the time.
Yeah.
And whenever people go like, but the original trilogy was so great. Oh, look at the new one. And it's like, look at Return of the Jedi again objectively. Tell me that it's that much better than Episode 1. It's better than Episode 2.
Yeah.
But, it's at around the same league as certainly one.
I don't know, when you think about Episode 1, it's like half a movie, then a movie when they're on Tatooine, and then the end of the first movie. They just did the cutting differently.
I know, it's an odyssey. And now, because the cutting makes a lot more sense in that one. And it still has problems, that I'll discuss later, but it is built as, okay, you have point A with the Jedi going like, okay, we have to stop this thing, and then you have the final scene of them stopping that thing.
Yeah.
And then in between, you have every obstacle humanly possible as they travel the world for no bloody reason. And that's the basic structure that that was introduced with Ulysses in the Odyssey. And
Okay.
It's just a copy of that structure.
Nowhere as good as the Odyssey. But, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. But you know what would have made the Odyssey even better? Remove all that god and supernatural stuff. No, wait a minute. Troy sucked.
If you remove all the gods and the monsters, it's just them being lost on the ship on the Mediterranean.
I know. It's just like, are we there yet? No. Are we there yet? No. Are we there yet?
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Alright, well, on that note, if you have any questions, comments, you can write us at mail@idiomanic.com or post a comment right below the episode at idiomanic.com.
Yep. See you next week.